First of all, welcome. Thank you for attending today on our Industrial Internet of Things workshop, session 3. I'm Andrew Burns, professor at the University of Northern Iowa, and obviously today's presenter. And I'll be talking about some topics related to or stemming from the work that Nathaniel Bryan and Jacob Odell have been doing, along with a fantastic team at the University of Northern Iowa with their Foundry 4.0 stuff. So, in previous examples, we went ahead and got started with the Raspberry Pi configurations and connected sensors using MQTT. That's what we did. I got the dates switched on those. July 10th and July 17th. And then today we're going to be talking about Node-RED, so dashboarding and logging information. So kind of like the logical conclusion of what we've been seeing. So we've built up a little small single board computer that can take in measurements and publish them. And then we've got now some sort of a way for us to take that information and use it to make actionable, take some actionable data, make some decisions, monitor our processes, things like that. So that'll be the topic for today's talk. Our goals will be, at the end of today's workshop, hopefully you'll have the Arduino IDE and the required libraries installed. That's obviously not related to a Node-RED issue, but that's something that we are going to do to set us up for success next week. And then we'll also be able to create flows to perform basic operations in Node-RED and the Node-RED software built over before. I put my email address there. If you have any questions, number one, feel free to follow along as we go through the workshop. If you do have any questions during the workshop and you'd like to ask them, feel free to go ahead and post them in the chat. Sometimes I don't hear if somebody chimes in through the voice capabilities, but I have the chat window up and monitored completely, so I'll see questions that you have for those. If you don't want to ask any questions during the session or you come up with questions after the session, feel free to reach out, send me an email. I'm more than happy to take a look at whatever problems you're having, catch you up. The idea would be before next week's session, you're caught up with this week's session. So anything I can do to help with that, feel free to shoot me an email. Or like I said, if you're during the session, feel free to post it in the chat and we'll go ahead and discuss it. So kind of step 0, what I want to get us started going with, just because it might take a little bit, is installing the Arduino IDE. Basically, all I want us to do right now is start the download for the software. And then depending on your internet connection, if it finishes, while we're still on this slide, you can feel free to go ahead and try to do the install. But we'll have time later as well. If you visit the website, it does give us a list of the major operating systems and the various versions for it. Feel free to download the one that is most appropriate for you. And then, like I said, if you do get the download done quickly, you can start the install, but it's not a big deal because later on, after everybody's had the download done, we'll go ahead and jump back to the install. So not a big first step there. Just get the Arduino software going, the download going, and we'll go ahead and finish installing the rest of it in a moment. What we will talk about then, back to our Internet of Things, is Node-RED. What exactly is Node-RED? What do we use it for? We saw a little bit of it at the presentation last week, where we used Node-RED to receive in some values, but we didn't actually do anything other than receive the values and print them to like a debug console. Node-RED actually has a lot more capabilities than that, and we're going to experiment with some of those today. Note that becoming an expert or even a well-versed in Node-RED is probably something that would be beyond even like a 4-week workshop here. So there's a lot of information. We'll try to give you some bits and pieces that are maybe most useful, and go from there. You can visit the Node-RED website at nodered.org if you would like. The main thing I'll highlight there is that they say it's a low-code programming for event-driven applications. The low-code part just means you don't have to be, it's not entirely writing programming, or it's not entirely programming, it's not entirely writing code. It might involve a little bit of that at certain places, thus the low instead of no code part. But you don't have to be a software engineer to get Node-RED to work and to perform the basic functionalities that are going to be necessary for our IoT deployments. Event-driven applications, of course, just means applications where we sense the environment, and then when something happens, we want to perform a particular action, whether that be an action of notification, an action of actuating the environment. Regardless, we're being driven by those. Most of the time, Node-RED has been used, or at least it's where it came from, was with MQTT and Internet of Things deployments, but you could certainly use Node-RED for other things. It's kind of grown into a big ecosystem. One reason to like it, besides the fact that you don't have to be a software engineer to get it to work, is that it is free and open source. I believe it's the Apache license. And so you can download it, install it, deploy it on as many machines as you want, completely free. And if you want to, you can even view the source code. So the idea with Node-RED is basically we have these idea of flows. A flow is just a series of steps that data will take. So data, gets fed into a flow at a particular point. It's going to go through different steps. Each one of those steps we'll call a node. The nodes will perform some action on the data and then pass it on to the next node in the network. Last session, we did a really simple two-node flow. If you recall, the current was the accelerometer values, the current accelerometer values that we were reading in. And it took the data that we were outputting there and passed it to this debug one. Debug one just being the thing that printed it out to the console so we could take a look at it. I'm going to run through and show that again really quick for us. If you remember, we have our Raspberry Pi Zero running with Node-RED installed. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to it over Secure Shell or SSH. And then I'm going to go to the directory where our code is kept. And you'll notice there's excel.py, which was our first attempt at it, and then publish excel.py, which was our program that actually took the data and published it to MQTT, or published it through the MQTT broker, which then was taken into Node-RED. I do want to make two minor changes to our file. That's going to simplify our life a little bit. I can show what it was like before. So before the code was this, the octothorpe or hashtag or pound sign is a comment in Python. And so what I've done here is I've taken the original code and uncommented it and then commented out the part that I want us to make, just to demo what the code was that we had. You'll notice what we're doing is we're publishing with the topic of current, and then we have some values X, Y, and Z for our accelerometer. They're coming in through there. So let's go ahead and take a look at our dashboard here. We've got our flow reading in connected to the debug. I can jump over here and make sure that I've clicked debug, and now it should display to me any sort of applications or any sort of data that's coming into it. So let's go ahead and run that program. Python 3 publish Excel. And you'll notice that it's displaying on the right-hand side here, it's displaying the messages that are coming through. I will point out that is unfortunately just a string. And so, a string, being a sequence of characters, I can't do any sort of like arithmetic on it. I can't add or subtract from it because you can see there's 3 values that are put there, and there's no easy way to pick out the ones that I'm looking for. So what we're going to do is our first step is going to be to take the information that originally was a string, convert that into something, quote unquote, actionable. In particular, we're going to convert it into a list of numbers, and then feed that data in, and we'll see that it's going to be able to treat it a little bit differently so that we can make decisions based upon our data. Again, our initial setup was just for printing, so a string was fine, but now we want to actually, automatically make decisions or monitor that data. So we're going to take a look at it. So I'm going to go ahead and add this line, import JSON, up at the top. JSON is just JavaScript object notation. It's just a standard form, a standard format for displaying data, and formatting. And then at the end, I want us to put a hashtag in front of the line that said current, that had X, Y, and Z as 3 different values. And then I want us to add the line client.publish current, and then we'll use a JSON.dumps, which is actually to dump a string. It's going to take a value, which in this case is an array of numbers, convert it into a string, and then pass that into the message with the topic of current. Okay. Now I'm going to run it again. And I come over here and I'll notice the old messages were coming in as strings. So I see they're just red with a quote at the beginning and a quote at the end. My new messages here are coming in. You'll see that number 1, there's a square bracket around them, meaning this is a list of values for me. And then they're also now blue instead of red, letting me know that, like, hey, this is a legitimate number type that you could add, subtract, compare, graph, do things like that with. So that's kind of the first thing we're going to do. In general, it's a good idea to try to keep the data that you are publishing as the same type that it was initially when you sensed it. So like it's again, the danger of leaving something as a string or turning something into a string, as we were doing, is that it's not as easy for me to parse that and actually make decisions on it. If I'm reading in floating point numbers, decimal numbers, then maybe I should publish decimal numbers. If I'm reading in, a category, I should publish maybe a categorical value, things like that. So that'll be the first change that we made to our code. Does anybody have any questions to get to this point? Okay. Again, if you do, feel free to post in the chat or send me an email. So now we've got our data coming in as a list of numbers. There's a picture of what the updated output's going to look like. And then what I want to do is out of those 3 values, I just want to look at one for now, just for ease of our demo. So what we're going to do is actually add a change node to our part. So you'll notice on the left-hand side of node red gives us our nodes. And what I can do, there's some function nodes which will modify the messages or modify the data somehow. I want to pick the change one, which is, as it says, as the help text, set, change, delete, or move properties of a message, flow context, or global context text. In particular, I want to take the message that had 3 values, and I want to make it have just 1 value. So I'm going to drag and drop over there. And then I'm going to double click on the change node. I'm going to tell it to set the message payload, the main thing that node read, the main chunk of data. I'm going to select the message dot. What that means is that I'm going to use the incoming value to determine what the outgoing value is going to be. In particular, I'm going to do payload and then square bracket 0. So remember, the payload initially is a list of 3 numbers. I'm basically saying change that payload to just the first number. You could certainly add, other outputs. In fact, we can do that. There's an add button to the value payload. Excuse me. Message dot payload 1, etc. So I could make multiple outputs for my modification. So this is basically splitting it up into different steps. Okay, I'm going to select done. I'm going to take from current, which is going to be the data that we're getting in, and drag it into the change node. Actually, for demonstrations purposes, let's just do the 1 for now, and then we'll come back to it. Now I've got the message being modified inside of the change node. I'm going to make a few adjustments to the formatting. Some of this is personal preference. There's also a lot of it that is, best practice. If you actually, on the Node-RED website, there's actually best practices for creating these flows that looks at things, beyond just can you get it to work, but can you make it maintainable so that you can understand. Obviously, like this network right now doesn't mean a whole lot, but what if I rename this thing to raw Excel values, and I set the name of this one to get X value. Now it starts to mean a little bit more. So I'll try to do that out of habit to get it in. Again, it doesn't affect the behavior, but it does affect the readability. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is try to use meaningful names. The second thing I want to do is I like to make the debug nodes be off of my, if you will, main line. So I've got like my message comes in here. My personal preference is to make it so that it goes immediately to the right and it's processing one particular step. And then the debug points are, hey, if you need additional information, you can go ahead and listen in at that point, but it's not actually affecting my flow. A debug, notice the debug has no output. It's just there so I can view data. It doesn't actually modify any of the data. And so I like to put them, if you will, off the main line. So I've got them getting the X value. I'm going to put another debug node in here. I'm going to name this one X value. And then I'm going to connect the get X value node to the X value and make my adjustments. So now once I've made a change to my my flow, I can go ahead and redeploy. So I'm going to click on the deploy one. And now if I take a look at let me clear the messages. I take a look at my debug, and now I have 2 messages that are being printed. I have the raw Excel values, which are given there in that list. And then I also have the X value, which we can see matches the value that's from the list. So I'm using these to monitor how it's going. Obviously, there's a few things we can do to make that debug actually a little bit cleaner for us. Right now, it's printing out 2 messages and over. We can filter based on selected nodes, or you can actually, if you click on the button to the right side of the debug, it actually turns that or deactivates that debug setting. So in a production flow, you might actually have, quite a few debug nodes that were points that you might want to monitor for debugging the values, as it says. But you turn those off so that they don't clutter up the final deployment. And so if I redeploy this one, let me just clear the settings. And now you see that the only thing being displayed is the message payload. Okay, so and that's the picture that we're dealing with now, just with better naming conventions for us to follow along with. Does anybody have any questions on getting to this point? Taking the MQTT input, changing it to get just the X value, and then for now printing it as a debug value to the console, the debug window. Okay. Obviously, the debug window is not, it's as the name implies, it's for debugging. It's really meant for the developer of the flow, or the engineer of the working on the flow, to be able to see kind of the inner workings of what's happening. It's not necessarily meant for quote unquote human consumption. Like it's not a pretty way to look at our data. And so what we're going to do is actually create a dashboard to make it more appealing to view that value. And in doing so, we're also going to expose one of the benefits of Node-RED, which is the really rich ecosystem, free ecosystem that it has for additional plugins that can already, or that can do things that, I would potentially want to do with my data. So what I'm going to do, the instructions are in the slides. I'm going to walk through them through the window. I'm going to click on the 3 bars here in the upper right-hand corner, and then I'm going to say Manage Palette. Now that lets me see the palette is the thing on the left-hand side that gives me all of the nodes that are available. And I see these are the nodes that are available on my list, or the different groupings of them. So I see there's one called function, and my guess is that's included in the common and function are inside of this Node-RED. Yep, 50 nodes. There's one called play audio. There's one called node email. You may not have all of those because I've set up mine to install a few, but you might have some of those already there. What I want to do is install the nodes that will actually display information to a user-friendly dashboard for us. So I'm going to click on install, and under search modules, I'm going to search for dashboard. And on mine, it's the third one down. It says node-red dashboard, excuse me. You can certainly Google for that, or you can search node-red dashboard directly, or just cite dashboard and go from there. Sorry. And then you want to click on that, and then if you don't have it installed, you'll click the install button. That's going to really quickly add those set of nodes to my palette. And then I'm going to go and close the window. I'm going to refresh the page. And now with the page refreshed, if I go to the left-hand side to my palette and I scroll down towards the bottom, I'll notice there's now a new category called dashboard. And that's going to contain, obviously, the nodes that will process data for the dashboard, or, as we'll see, generate data that will from the dashboard. So I can actually use both inputs and outputs. General tip, things that are based that need that have inputs are usually on the left-hand side, and then the outputs usually on the right-hand side. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a chart. I'm going to drag that in. I'm going to put this above, snap it to it, above our example. I still wouldn't consider this to be part of the main line. Again, this is just something that I'm monitoring the data, but there's maybe more things I want to do with it. But I'll go ahead and connect my get X value to my chart. I'm going to double click on chart, and then I can go ahead and do the customizations. The dashboard is grouped into groups. And so what I'm going to want to do is modify that or add one. So I'm going to click the plus button. I'm going to select the Home tab. I'm going to leave it as default for now, because we will only have one. So I'll click Add. Now this should say Group brackets Home Default, aka the Home tab default group. And then I'm going to leave the rest of the things alone, except for the label. This will be X values. So this is going to make a line chart of my data. You'll notice I can change the colors of it. I can change the X-axis. Right now it's set to be 1 hour of data, but obviously if we want it to be a different granularity, I just modify it there. Yeah, a lot of stuff that you can go ahead and modify if you would like to get it. We just want to get the bare minimum here so that we can get an example and see how the dashboard is going to work. So I'm going to say done. Again, I've added nodes. So I'm going to redeploy. That is, I'm going to click on the deploy thing, and it tells me it was successfully deployed. So how do I view this dashboard? Now, actually, if I go to the URL of my node red 192.168.0.136, again, this is the IP address of the Raspberry Pi. Yours is almost surely different. But you'll type that in, and then I'm going to go to UI for user interface and press enter. And now node red pops up, and now I have a default group that's giving me my X values, and I can see, again, this is going to be an hour's worth of data, which is probably not the granularity you would normally want given our sample rate of a couple of seconds. But it's giving me that data, graphing it, and showing how it changes. So if I'm going to reach down and flip the accelerometer. And then we can see that, oh, the data went from, some values here at minus 1.37 all the way up to this peak here of 12.51. And now it's settled back down to more almost zero, almost perfectly level on the X-axis for that. Yeah, so that's a way I can add more charts by just dragging more of those nodes up into my window, and make the dashboard look nicer, or have the kind of information that I want. Getting this customized, I can jump ahead a little bit and give you an idea of this. These are the steps that we've already taken. Here's an example of a dashboard that they use here at the University of Northern Iowa. Significantly more complicated than the one that we built. There's different types of charts that are on there. You'll notice there's more tabs on the left-hand side that you can adjust. There's ways to interact, so it's not just displaying data, but it's also taking in some data for us. That's, setting that up requires some knowledge of HTML and CSS, and then some time to find the plugins. It isn't outside of the scope of what you can do. It's just it's a longer process than we have time for us. So that's just something that what our dashboard can look like with a low code, no code interface like Node-RED. Does anybody have any questions so far on getting our chart going from Node-RED? Okay. I've got 2.5 more tasks that we can take a look at with time permitting. If we need to, I can certainly help you work through these on your own too. Some common things that you might want to do would be, say, log your accelerometer values to a CSV file. So obviously, like our charts are temporary. They're going to displace data for like the current setting 1 hour, and then the old data falls off. If the server resets, if the Node-RED server resets, or there's some sort of an error, I'm going to lose all of that history. So what I might want to do, if I have the space for it, would be to save that data coming in. And I'm going to save the raw values before we filter out the X, Y, and Z. As a general rule, I've always found it best to save as much as you can, because you never know when you'll want to go back and recover some things. So let's go ahead and do that CSV file. I'm back in our flow. Inside of the palette, there should be a grouping called storage that has write file, read file, and watch. Obviously, the write file is going to be what we're doing to get save stuff for it. So pardon me as I switch the order. I don't like the order of those. I like my debugs to appear at the top. We'll promote this one. I'm going to write a file, take that current data, connect it to the write file, and then I'm going to give it the path of it. I'm going to, you probably want to give it, it's telling you down here, you probably want to give it the absolute path. Otherwise, it's going to be inside of the working directory, which you may not know off the top of your head, or you may have to look up. Entirely up to you. For our purposes, I'm going to put it in the home/pi/documents/Excel vals.csv. And then I'm going to tell it that I want to append to the file. If I wanted to, I could overwrite or delete the file every time. So this would be something where I don't want to keep a long-term history. I just want to be able to say, what was the last, say, significant event, and we'll see how we can modify something like that too. So I'm going to say done. Again, I've made a change. So let's jump over and redeploy. Now, if I go back to my terminal, I'm sorry, let me pop in a new one, SSH pi 192.168.0.136. Now, if I take a look at if I take a look at the contents of my directory documents, I now see that there's an Excel vals.csv. And then if I go tail, that just means it's a Linux command to look at the end of a file, and then the -f means follow, so watch it be built. So this file is being built in real time as our program runs, or as our Node-RED runs. And so if the power cycles, the reset Node-RED, whatever, like this is a file, it's the it's going to be around, it's as permanent storage or close to permanent. Again, I just moved the accelerometer, and notice the values that were being written to it change accordingly. So definitely one of the things we can do that you might find helpful is log the data, and you can do it at various points. So you can make more outputs however you want to do it. I'm going to cancel the follow, and it's going to continue to run. Pardon me as it's like software engineering in that you want it to be readable, because you never know when you'll go back. So what I've done here is just drug those blocks over a little bit. And now I can see that I read in a current value. I can, if you will, put a debug probe into it. I'm saving the values to a CSV, and I'm changing the values to get the X value. Again, I've got a debug probe into the X value, and I've got a chart that's coming through. I'll deactivate it so I don't muddy up my window over here. Yeah. So that's step one, using Node-RED to go ahead and say save data to a file to allow analysis later. Other things we can do, I say notify by email when values for x-axis change significantly, but I don't define significantly because we'll see what I mean here in a moment. One of the nice things about Node-RED, as we've already seen with the dashboard, is the huge set of existing flows and nodes that have already been made that can make your job very easy to get things like emails set up, etc. So what I can do is, again, I can go to Manage Palette. I'm going to go to Install. And I'm just going to search email. And my second result says Node-RED node email. You'll notice it's already installed for me. If it's not for you, you can go ahead and install it. And then immediately to the right, there's the little box with the arrow out letting me know, hey, there's help documentation available for this particular node. We install, you don't have to worry about this npm part. It tells me, oh, if you're using Gmail, you need to enable an application password or less secure access. Application password's great. What that's going to do is give me basically a temporary password that is only for, the intent is that it's only for my Node-RED sending of data, and that I can always go through and delete it later once I no longer need email notifications. I believe I have that set up on this account already. That's okay. We have it set up already. It'll be a 16-digit string that you'll type in for it to get it to work. So install that, set up the one-time password, and then now I notice on the left-hand side, I have email listed here. This is email as input, it's on the left-hand side. This is email as output, it's on the right-hand side. So I'm going to drag this over and then say for my X value. Now, what I want to do is only allow it to send when certain, like maybe it changes a lot. Maybe I don't want to get an email every time I take a reading, but instead I want to get a reading every time there's a big change, something like that. I can jump back to my main blocks. The filter, report by exception, basically passes the data on, it's telling you right there, passes the data on if the change has been big enough. So I'm going to put that, I'm going to drag the email over, put my filter in. I'm going to say block unless value change is greater than or equal to 2. So what that's going to do is if there's a big change, it's going to go ahead and pass the data on, and then normally not. And then under the email, I'm going to give it to me. Here's where I put the username and password in there. And then I could redeploy. And then anytime that that value changes greater than 2 or greater than 10%, or and if you don't like change, there's you can have it anytime the value exceeds a certain threshold. Anytime periodically, every 10 minutes, send an email, every day, send an email, things like that. Very customizable, easy to use and set up. Shoot me an email if you want help getting some of that stuff set up too. Okay. So that's the example of sending emails for significant changes. I've got a link here. You can find other ones that are like this. basically, I bring it up just because Node-RED has a thriving online community, and you can definitely find information about new features and take existing flows, find help in forums, things like that. So like here's, a list of, look, you can basically talk with the different hardware devices, smart home devices. There's a database thing in here where you can actually connect to databases with it directly. There's a database option. And this is just one person's list. There's plenty more out there. Node-RED website has it contained on there. And you can adjust that to however you see fit. So that's kind of the the 40-minute Node-RED introduction that can't come close to covering even the basic features. There's filtering, there's changing, there's adjusting timings, things like that. Node-RED does have great documentation on their website. And again, you can also send me an email, and I'm happy to help get set up the flows that you're trying to do, or in the worst case, point you to somebody who does know how to get those flows set up for you. Eventually you're going to build things that, like, here's one of the flows used at the University of Northern Iowa. You might end up with something that looks more advanced like this. So you see there's multiple steps going in there. There's functions that are performing operations on the data, et cetera. We already talked about that. Your dashboards will probably look stronger or look more impressive with more readable information. And then, there's other things you can do, display from webcams, connect to PLCs, browse for files. I mentioned the cameras, all sorts of customizations that you can do with Node-RED that go beyond the scope of just what we have time for today. But it's definitely an option that's out there, and I'm more than happy to help. Does anybody have any questions on Node-RED before we finish off with our Arduino installation? Okay. In your supply list, there was an ESP8266 microcontroller that you were asked to purchase. Looks a little something like. We're going to, for our next session, do some programming to actually use these microcontrollers to read in the values and pass them into Node-RED. So the Raspberry Pi Zero is a lightweight single board computer, but we can go even, quote unquote, lighter weight. We can go even lower cost, lower power requirements if we look at some microcontrollers. And so we're going to use the Arduino libraries, the Arduino setup IDE to set it up. If you have installed, if your download's successful, you can go ahead and install it. And then once you've installed it, you can go ahead and open it up. And what we want to do is go ahead and go File, and then Preferences. And then under this Additional Boards Managers URL, I want you to paste in these two locations. If you go to the bit.ly link that I give there, it's just the string. So if you go to the bit.ly link, copy the contents of that file and then paste them into the boards part, and then say okay. What that's going to do is it basically gives the, if you will, the driver for this particular microcontroller, so that the Arduino IDE knows how to communicate with it, how to program it, and how to control the various things on it. So that'll help us set us up for success next week by letting us know that we have the ESP ready to go. Second thing we want to do is install the libraries for both the MQTT protocol and publish subscribe. And so to do that, I'm going to go to Tools. And then I'm going to say Manage Libraries. And then what I can do is search for something like, sorry, there we go, pub sub client. And then I'm looking for the one by Nick O'Leary. One of the Node-RED developers is Nick O'Leary. And so go ahead and find that. And should be on the, yep, pub sub client by Nick O'Leary. Find that, click the install button on whatever the most recent version is. And then that should be it. That should be good to go for the Arduino setup for next week, so that we can fit it in the 50 minutes that we have, or 55 minutes that we have. If you get some time, you can also do the BME 280, but we'll repeat that one as well. Again, just in the libraries, just search for BME 280. You're looking for the Adafruit library. Add that to your install that library as well, so that we can use that driver for it. So kind of wrapping up, what were our major achievements today. Hopefully you got the Arduino IDE installed. I know that takes a bit, and so we started it early. So you got that installed and configured for our next session. So you've got the correct libraries added to it, and you've got the correct quote unquote drivers, if you will, for the hardware board added to it. And then we talked about Node-RED flows and customizations at length. So hopefully, at this point, you could make a dashboard showing the information that you want to have, and have ways of, saving history and notifying yourself of important events. And then from there, play around. Node-RED, like I said, their documentation is great. They have a couple of walkthroughs for some basic examples. You can go online. People are, generally helpful when it comes to that. And then, of course, I'll leave my email address here again, andrew.burns@uni.edu. If you'd like to get something set up with your Node-RED and you're having some trouble, feel free to reach out. I very likely will not know the answer off the top of my head, but I'm more than happy to go ahead and find, help you look for that answer, point you in the direction of people who would know the answer, things like that. So feel free to do so. Yeah, that's kind of our major achievements for the day. I've mentioned it several times. Put in our final plug, July 31st, expanding our builds with microcontrollers. So that should be pretty exciting. We'll do some hardware programming and interact with our existing system on our Pi Zero. And that would be a great example of how you could take Arduinos and add them to your existing setups, and have them monitor stuff. So look forward to that. What questions do you have for me then? Yeah, thank you everybody for attending. I'll stick around. So if you do have questions, feel free to post them in the chat. Thank you so much for coming and for listening in. And don't hesitate, put the address up there again. Don't hesitate to send me an email if you do have questions on getting your Node-RED setup going. So otherwise, yeah, I'll just hang out, answer questions if people want to stick around. And yeah, thank you so much for coming. It's much appreciated. Glad we had an audience. So.